talk about simplifying the strategy in your head so that you should be working when you're thinking about your strategy, trying to develop it with your team. You're trying to decide, break it down to the simple answer the simple question: am I going to go to a side or am I going to play in the middle? So, for example, if I want to go to a side to get out of current, or because I see more wind over there, persistent shift, whatever the reason is to go to a side, then we go to a side. Lacking all of that, you end up playing shifts up the middle, or maybe connecting some dots and puffs up the middle, or some combination of the two. But in the end, in my head, I'm thinking, am I trying to get to a side, or am I finding my way up the middle?
Okay, so now we're sailing in the 100-boat sunfish worlds. There's a lot of traffic, right? And so presuming you're always in the front group there, so everything's easy when you're out front, right? But I'm actually going to challenge you here. What about if you're sort of in the second group back, right? Okay, so you've got that front group is jumped ahead off the start, and now you have to make this decision of, do I sail the middle of the edge? How do you deal with being in kind of the mid pack?
Yeah, so if here's your weather mark, here's your starting line. And, I think if you're trying to go sail the course, if I'm trying to sail the course and I want to do something, whether it's middle or edge, I want to go somewhere and there's a lot of traffic in my way. And when I mean traffic, I mean either physically, like if I want to go right, but to get there, I have to do a gigantic duck of 50 boats. I can't clear the fleet, so I have to get through them. And in a big fleet, that's real. Like there's so much wind shadow there that, or the other answer is I'm not in the front row, like you just said, and I'm in dirty air. And so the answer is always comes down to how bad do I want to get there? And how bad is this dirty air? I'll give you an example. I did a race where it was lighter air and it was clearly more pressure over on the right. And pressure matters in light air. It was an edge day for sure. It was a St. Pete, midwinters. And I just remember vividly because I had a crappy start and my main competitors and a big pile of boats all tacked right away. They all tacked right away. And they were kind of continuing to tack. It was a big fleet. And so I had the choice of, I kind of started here. I had the choice of, do I go past them? And when I finally get clear, take a clear lane over, or just tack right away anyway. And I just said, I'm going to tack away right away anyway. And the way I made that choice was, I figured if I tacked in this dirty air, how much am I going to lose by sitting in the air, dirty air? So I figured over that whole port ley line, not port line, there's this whole port getting to the right, I might lose 6 or 7 boat lengths, which seems like a lot. So if I stay here, it's minus, let's just say 6 boat lengths. But the alternative was, it was just filling in. It wasn't just this. It was sort of like, it was just getting windier and windier as you got over here. And the alternative was that I would continue to go, and I'll make that in blue, and do this. So let's make this a different color so it's really obvious. Is I wait until there's some clear lane, because all these boats, I had to wait for the people to clear out and go. And what happened was that I look back, and the people that did this, they were losing like 20 and 30 boat lengths because it was light air. So our group just shot ahead, and I stayed kind of in the hunt at least. So the answer is, you got to decide how much you're going to lose by staying in dirt and how much am I going to lose by going the wrong way.
I'll take the 6 over the 20 to 30 any day.
But it's really hard to do in the moment, right? Like,
yeah.
we're so trained just to avoid dirty air that we don't take the 6 usually. Usually like, okay, I'll wait till there's a clear lane, and you look over, there is no clear lane. So.
Okay. earlier when we talked about sort of this nice, beautiful oscillating shifts up the middle, again, you're sort of second group back. Can you really take advantage of that being in bad air up the entire middle, or there is a point where you just got to get kind of middle to an edge?
So the beauty of oscillating breeze is that you can kind of pick where you tack. Like, the fleet's going along, we're sailing upwind, right? And maybe on a righty, and then they tack. And you might be able to find some compromise. That's what I'm trying to do when it's sort of like an oscillating up the middle, and I want to go up the middle, but I'm not in good shape. I still want to stay in phase, but I'll find some like marginal lane, right? Like I'm not looking for the perfect lane. I think that's the answer. If you're looking for the perfect lane where you're all by yourself, you're going to sail so far that the next shift will come and then you'll be out of phase. The other thing I do is I'll tend to like lead, like if I think that a shift's coming, or I feel a start of a shift, I might go right away, like be the first attack. And then when the people that have a little bit of a lead get a chance to attack, hopefully they've gone past me a little bit and I get myself a bigger lane. I'm trying to time things so that I'm not perfect. I would have rather sailed into the shift further too, but at least I'm staying in phase in a compromise. I'm willing to take a compromise.
And I guess that goes to the point of just being, or obviously somebody really watching the leaders, and the leaders kind of tend to flow in groups as well. And as soon as that first boat goes, chances are, they see something that's coming, and you react now rather than wait for the rest of the group to go. And now you're fighting for a lane.
And back to the compromise thing, that you'd rather, if those boats weren't there, you'd rather dig in, wait for that to really be a header before you go, cross that median. But maybe you're tacking just a little bit before you get to the median, assuming that the reason they're tacking is that they're getting the shift, they're up in the lead, they're probably know what they're doing. So, and then you're always doing this trade-off of compromises, and the compromises in your position, and maybe like a marginal lane instead of a good one. And your other compromise is this, that we talked about before, is you kind of do this quick math in your head to make those hard decisions. Hey, if I take this compromise lane, I'm only going to lose a little bit, but it keeps me in the game. And, back to the fact that you probably won't win that race, but at least you're hanging in there.
Saving points. All right. So staying in the middle, this could probably be a whole nother article that we talk about. This, as the triangle gets smaller at the top, the inside ley line, do you find that is it better to sail up the middle once you get to the top, once you get into a lot of traffic, when people are starting to set up on the edge and on the outside ley line?
So I think I think you can continue to sail the middle if you're in that top group or in a smaller fleet. If you're in a big fleet and you're not in that top little group, or even a fleet that there's another fleet in front of you and everything's converging, I think you've got to start choosing. Like, I stop thinking about whether I'm playing oscillations or an edge, and I start to think about just boat on boat, how am I going to play this out? And I look at how things are stacking up. And, oftentimes, this ley line is just so crowded, right? If these are boats. And, I'm trying to figure out a way to avoid that ley line, but then the more I come out here, the riskier it gets. So I kind of, if I want to go a little bit right, maybe I shadow below this, I take this line below that pack. And then I take some risk by tacking in late, particularly if I get inside the 3 boat lane zone. This is the safer, but you're going to lose a lot. So those are and to me, this becomes more about geometry and where the boats are and less about my overall strategy.
Right.
Maybe I'll take a look here and say, is there a compelling reason to go one way or the other at the top? Maybe there's a giant puff over here or a giant puff over here, it's worth sailing through this and getting into it. But more often than not, I'm just like, okay, where's the least amount of traffic? Because it's getting so dense. There is no good lane out of here.
Mm.
I'm just trying to make the best of it.
Goes back to have a good start, no problem. Everything goes easy from there.
Yeah, get a good start, go fast, hit the first shift. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's not reality, right? Like
Yeah.
and like you said, you brought up the scenario that maybe it's not even your fault. There's another fleet in front of you.
Yeah. So stay in the middle again, just so downwind, what are some good rules of thumb in terms of traffic management, but also, as we talked in an earlier episode about those fewer puffs, fewer shifts. Is it better to separate from the group to get a little clean air, or just still kind of put the priority over the strategy side versus the traffic side?
Yeah, so I think, downwind, if you got symmetric shoots and everybody's going low, there's these giant, they take up a lot of space and a lot of, there's sort of like nowhere you can be down here that's any good. Whereas upwind, I think there's more compromised lanes that people are willing to take. I think people need to be more open to taking those compromised lanes, and they exist more.
Mm.
And I think downwind, they just take so much room. And, I think to some degree that's even true with asymmetrical, because you just got so much sail area. But I think the thing that, it's just a gigantic amount, the wind shadows here instead, or something like that, but here. But whereas with the symmetric shoot, here's your main, here's your boat, right? It's directly in front is the wind shadow. But I think that downwind, you really need to play your apparent wind. The play is back. I think too many people look forward, and your play is back. So if you're going down, we'll just for the heck of it, we'll just say you have an asymmetric shoot, or a symmetric shoot rather, and there's a boat on your wind. Well, you can kind of go up or go down to get out of that wind, or to connect to a puff. And you have to be looking back to see whether you're going to get out of that puff or not, where that puff is or where the wind shadow is. And the rule of thumb here is that your masthead fly is pointing toward wherever the bad, dirty air is going to be. Maybe I should make that in red. So suppose you're going dead downwind and your masthead flies there. Well, just follow that straight back, and anything here, you're in. If it's a puff, you're going to hit the puff. If it's a wind shadow from a boat or a lull, you're going to get to that. And you just head up a little bit, and as soon as you head up, your apparent wind changes quite a bit. So I think there's more maneuverability downwind because your apparent wind changes now. So now your masthead fly might point here, and you pretty quickly get out of this dirty air. If there's, suppose this is your dirty air, something bad's happening here. Same with the other way. I also think downwind, if you look at polars of most boats, you have a big range of steering. There's an optimum downwind speed, but it's pretty flat. So in other words, if you head up or bear off from that optimum, you're still going pretty close to your VMG. And so you can play these angles more than upwind, which have a narrower groove.
And on top of that, it's a correlate, a lot of these big fleets, we have offset marks, which, that offset leg can be quite long. And, even on maybe on starboard jibe, you find yourself actually on the edge immediately, right? As soon as you turn downwind, and then there tends to be the boats drift to the edges. And then all of a sudden, sometimes you find you're like, man, look at all that space out in the middle, but it's still deadly. Why is that? Is it just because the wind is still coming over the fleet, or why does it take us so long to get back to the middle?
Yeah, everybody's kind of like, everybody's bearing off here, right? And if you're up here, you don't know where they're going to bear off to. And so typically until you get further down and people spread out, you're you don't want to be right here. I'm on to symmetric shoots again, but
yeah.
There's sort of a path. I find that I want to commit to one side or the other right away. Like if I'm rounding, I'm either going to go outside here so that I have some freedom, or go low. And I think this is my default, is to do this, because this, there's still people going upwind and on the offset. This initial part, particularly if it's light wind, can be death for a little while.
Mm.
Got to be pretty compelling. But I'm making that decision while I'm still going upwind. I'm saying, which dive do I want to be on? Because you can end up committed pretty quick, and maybe it's really hard to get across the fleet at that point.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the big differences between being in the middle of the fleet when you're, if you're not in that front group that's spread out, you really have to commit to an edge early downwind. And I don't care whether that's, that could be a symmetric or asymmetric. I do think with the asymmetric, you have more options, kind of like upwind. You can jibe more downwind, and you see a path. Maybe you can clear your air and do what you need to do by jibing and going the other way. Whereas symmetric, when you're going squaring off, at least when it's windy enough to square off.
Okay, so I'm going to complicate it real quick. So this is one of the things that was an interesting point that Kate Terhune, our overall winner at the Helly Hansen Sailing World Regatta in Annapolis, on their circle, she was sailing J70s, but they had J88s and giant fleet of J80s and 105s. And I found it interesting. She was basically saying at some point, yes, the middle was better than the edges, counterintuitive, but there's a point where she's playing more the shifts versus trying to get to the edge to get out of the the dirty middle. Is there some good advice on kind of multi-class sailing, in that scenario, I guess, in sort of part one when it's windy, part two when it's light?
Yeah, so I think that the windier it is, I think if you can, the fallacy of getting to an edge to get clear, like you might think, oh, good, there's not many boats here on the right. I can just go all the way to this edge and I'm free. And then, but you're not going to be free pretty soon. There's a whole bunch of other people going to that edge also. So I think, kind of like our really crowded starboard ley line, that we drew before, that's an edge, right? Like if you went all the way to the corner and it's a giant fleet and you're sitting in that dirt the whole way, there's no way out. And I think, that happens some degree to the left too. If you have other divisions, people are just trying to get free to the edge because they're not winning either, right? So they're like, oh, I better go to an edge, and they can get to a free edge. Well, you're in the next group that there's no freedom wherever you go. And I think that's where the compromise lanes come in. And at some point you just sail your race and you say, I'm in a little bit of dirt, but I'm lifted. I better just stay in phase. That's all I can do. And everybody else has the same problem too, right? Like it's not that somebody else gets to sail free and you don't.
Yeah. And I guess you could sort of simplify that there's no clean air for anybody. So
Right.
you're sort of back to square one of just sailing the race as if you're in the absence of other boats.
Right. But I think psychologically, a little bit like, are you willing to take that 6 boat length loss that I mentioned, that first scenario I said, was, are you willing to go sit in a compromised lane in a little bit of dirt and lose a little bit all the time, knowing that that's your only alternative and that you better stick to your game plan anyway, because it's just going to get worse on the edge too.
Yeah.
So at least by going up the middle at that point, you can look like, oh, maybe the left edge is opening up for me. Or maybe if I just go on port for a little while longer, I get some clear air for a little while. You get yourself some options.
Okay. Man, we could go on this topic for probably for days, I suppose, because every scenario is different. But I want you to, if you can, layer on some current action here, right? That hey, you're trying to play your strategy, middle edge. You got a current play, you've got other fleets. In the hierarchy, I guess, of clean air, current relief, and traffic management. We love our rule of thumb. Is there a good way to kind of think through some of these scenarios?
So I think when you're making that first decision, suppose you say it's an edge day, it's current, and that's your compelling component. And it's, you're at Charleston Race Week and you're, in the river in Charleston, and it's really compelling to get to the shore. So just for example. And so it's an edge day. The next question I always ask myself is, how compelling is it? So in the Charleston example, it might be so compelling, I don't care what kind of dirt I'm in. It's like compelling, right? So if the answer is yes, then you have this mindset that no matter what happens, if I'm in dirt, if I'm in second row, third row, fifth row, other, some, J80 tax on me, whatever it is, then I'm going to stick with the plan. I'm going to go to that edge. If it's not compelling, then I'm more willing to kind of work my way that way. Like suppose it's only a little bit of current relief. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's current or a persistent shift or a land effect on the left or whatever it is. Whatever the reason is you want to go left, the answer is, how compelling is it? And with that, so if before the start we say, plan is to go left to get out of the current, right? Left, current. And then this discussion about how compelling it is goes into plan B. Okay, suppose we get a bad start. So great, if we get a good start, we're just going to hold on a lane, easy, we go left. Suppose we get a bad start. Are we going to do a clearing tack? So depending on how compelling it is, I can do A, I could just do a clearing tack. So this is plan B.
You're telling me you always have a plan B, huh?
Always have a plan B. Like I just in the off chance I don't get a good start, right? I can do a clearing tack, or I could suck it up. So that scenario where I went right, it was worth sucking it up. Or C is I just ditch going left and we make it an open course. We go back to the middle. It's not worth struggling to get to the left. So this is probably the wrong order, right? If I wanted to put it in order, this is super compelling, right? This would be super compelling. This is compelling. And this would be like, eh.
Yeah, we love the meh. That's a great.
Right.
Whew, man, I feel so much smarter already. All right. Well, I think I'm ready for the season. Let's see, we're here in Eric. It's Bay. It's current. It's the subtlety. It's fleet management.
Well, I think that the answer is always going to be, how compelling is it to go the way you want to go, or including up the middle. And you need to be able to put a number to that. So when I say compelling, is it, if I go left versus right and it's really compelling, that might be a, 20 boat length difference, right? Well, if it's that compelling, then I'm willing to sit in dirty air because I'm not going to lose 20 boat lengths in dirty air. If it's compelling, but it's 5 boat length, well, I am going to lose 5 boat lengths or more sitting in dirty air. So then maybe I'm willing to try to go that way, but on my own terms. And if it's barely compelling at all, like I think so, like 2, then if you can't get that way, find another way up the course. It doesn't even matter.
25-2. I'm going for the 2. Anything.
Not up to you. Like it's like this isn't your call. This is how compelling it is. You don't get to make that up. This is your best assessment.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're not going to be super accurate about this, right? Like this is just some wild guess of how compelling it is in terms of boat lanes. And as soon as you do that, then you can make the trade-offs on whether it's worth sitting in dirty air or a compromised lane or clearing tack or just forgetting the whole thing.